Good morning and welcome to the June 27th meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board. We're glad to have everyone today. And even though I can't see who else is on the call, Daniel, maybe you can say if others are joining, but we're still waiting for a quorum. So we'll just sort of get started with board business since we've got a bunch of things to cover. Really, this meeting will be focused on some board action items and kind of live discussions that we're having on a number of things. We don't have a guest today, so we'll be able to sort of move through our own business without somebody filling our space. So let's see, looking at my announcements, we continue to carry a vacancy, which is a mayoral appointee. If you are interested, let us know and apply on the city's website. I think if folks are interested in applying, it is helpful perhaps to let a member of the board know. We had a community meeting a month and a half ago where folks said, you know, I never got on the board and I don't know why. The board doesn't pick our own members. So I think it's helpful to mention that. Other nonprofit boards, you know, do have the ability to sort of staff and pick their own teammates. But in this case, the selection process rotates between the mayor and city council. And so it can feel like a black box. I think it felt like a black box to all of us who got on the board, and you kind of like emerge at the end with a certificate. So if folks are interested in learning more about that process, I think board members would be happy to connect and provide more information, but just so there's not confusion as to like the board didn't pick community members for those roles, but also we are still waiting for the mayor's office to finalize the selection for us. So we continue to wait with bated breath. Okay, a few items that are sort of underway from a board perspective. There's been a lot going on with regard to flock cameras, which the city sought to renew a contract with a contractor called Flock, and they are a national provider of camera technology to police and law enforcement. The city council denied that contract, and the city intends to use that technology until the contract runs out later this year. There are a number of news reports, and I actually personally have a friend in my network who's an immigration attorney in Massachusetts who had a client picked up as a result of flock data being accessible to law enforcement. We've heard stories of folks who are seeking abortion care in other states being tracked in states that have less preferable environments to those choices. And so there's lots of concerns, I think, about general surveillance, where the data lives, how long it's kept, who has access to it, et cetera. The board is also starting to get interested in the sort of general surveillance state that the city has begun to create. And I know the police chief talked about it a little bit last week or last meeting, which was we've got the flock cameras, the red light cameras, the halo cameras, the drone deployment, we've got body cams, right? And so we've got kind of this emerging set of technologies that contain a lot of information about residents in the city, and perhaps not as much thought going into the data sharing, maintenance, integration, and eventually, you know, that could become a matter of concern and sort of a general sense of a surveillance state being established a little bit haphazardly. So that's something that's going on. We've got last week the COB sent a letter to the mayor and city council along with public safety leaders regarding education-based discipline. We had heard from the chief of police that he had intended to go live July 1st. And so the board was attempting to provide additional information to policymakers with regard to the challenges that education-based discipline in its current form causes for oversight and also accountability. I will say that we've heard from some city council people from that, but we have not heard from the mayor's office, who would likely have the most authority to act on that. The board is also discussing a placement of an op-ed regarding.
Before you go on,
Yep.
Julia, what was the response from the city council that you heard back from?
Folks were looking for more information about sort of the current state of the policy. I understand the department has not shared that with them. We have provided our insights with them. But as the chief said in the meeting, last meeting, you know, they're still working on it and they don't intend to share a draft before going live. So I think that's causing a good amount of confusion. I will also say, in follow-up to that email to council and mayor, we also sent an email to public safety leaders specifically saying, you know, here are our specific concerns with EBD, and it's really unclear how you're going to go live with this next week when you're still receiving very detailed feedback, and what you say in a meeting is different than what's written down in the policy, is what's you know, not clear in the intentions of the program. In particular, you know, just to articulate it here, the board's concerns are sort of threefold. One, we don't agree with it in the first place, and we were never asked if we thought it was a good idea. We just were presented with a draft and told it was going to go live. Two, the policy, it has been sort of haphazardly written, inconsistent. You know, the language it uses is very different than what leaders are talking about in terms of its content. So here are the types of behaviors and areas of the disciplinary matrix that would be covered versus what it actually says in the policy. In many cases, the policy just says it'll be this through this, except where the chief decides it's not. And so there's so much discretion. The last thing, that all that discretion goes into the main concern that the board has, which is this will cover 65 to 75% of the disciplinary actions that the department takes. And so will fundamentally change the environment for oversight and accountability in the city. And that will have been accomplished by the police department without really any public process, without evidence that suggests this is a best practice, and without engagement really in the oversight environment through the COB and the monitor's office. You know, we sort of had to force our way in on this. And, you know, while on the one hand, maybe it reduces the workload of the monitor's office, on the other hand, nobody said that that was a thing that needed to happen. And so, you know, the outcome here is that, you know, with a very discretion-based process, a good amount of police conduct that is not in accordance with their expectations will be managed sort of internally to the department. And that the board has stated over and over is not acceptable. So we've also heard from many community groups that nobody else wants this. The chief has said, you know, there's overwhelming support. It's unclear to the board in what context the information has been presented. We understand in some of the sort of
no, he claims surveys. He claims surveys are his evidence of support.
So like district meetings, and that's like commanders are providing information on a process absent context to community members who are unfamiliar with the accountability and discipline processes. So you say, is education a good thing for police officers? And people say, of course. And so, you know, that would be easy to achieve overwhelming support in a very unscientific and not deep community engaged way. So that I think is a summary. Are there any board members that want to sort of highlight other concerns or things that are on their mind with regard to EBD?
No, you've hit most of the highlights, yeah.
And I've been reading the information available from the who's been designated as the subject matter expert, Dr. Harold. and I posed the question asking if there has been research and assessment documented comparing the traditional discipline matrix to using EBD. I asked if the intent and design of EBD was to replace the traditional disciplinary matrix. So I'm hoping that those questions get answered. I wasn't getting the sense that the EBD talked about in the information that was provided by the chief was really designed to replace the existing disciplinary matrix that we have. So I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah, whether it's part of a holistic approach to accountability and discipline, or if it's like most stuff goes on this sort of side journey that no one looks at, and then just this really serious stuff goes to the monitor's office. That is not what, city charter requires. And like I said, no one on the board said this was a good idea, and no one in the monitor's office said this was a good idea. So it's really creating a process that will be both confusing and sort of sidelining the main point of accountability, which is transparency to the public, in addition to, accountability for actions that fall outside of expectations. Okay, so more to come there. Oh, go ahead. Karen, were you gonna say something?
No.
Or Rufina, sorry.
I don't think anybody said.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm on my phone here, so it's really awkward. So maybe since we're talking about EBD right now, we could quickly discuss sort of op-ed. I know we had chatted briefly that an op-ed was something we felt like we were ready for. We've got a draft that some folks have provided reactions to, and I just wanted to get a sense from the board as to like, okay, do we start to try and seed this with publications? And originally it was sort of a hurry because, next week is July 1st and we thought we were working against that deadline. But as the chief said in an email last week, like, who said I was looking at July 1st? And the answer is you did, but fine. We'll work towards another deadline. That's okay. So, what do you think in terms of...
Maybe he meant July 1st, 2026.
Sure.
He could have been talking 2026 for all we know.
Some other July in some other world. So do we think, if folks want to put their edits in that doc, do we think that that's the thing we want to move forward with? Do we want to move forward with it, or do we want to wait till we get a new deadline? Or like, what do we feel like in terms of timing and energy around this?
Well, I have an initial question. So, I understood the letter to the city council and the and the mayor. That was a very good strategic piece to do. The op-ed, were we trying to garner other support, I assume, and try to forestall this event from happening, in which case we were really short on time. I mean, that was like, right on the eve. And now we've got a little bit more time. So are we still wanting to garner support? And is the op-ed the main thing to do? I can understand it when we're short on time to put that out, blast it. Or is this more of a careful strategic effort and we start to address it in a different way and still hold the op-ed as a possibility if something shifts, or do it both at the same time? I don't know. This is the conversation I'd like to have.
I guess so. So my thought is a number of community groups are already activated around this. So that would be the sort of better way to get people engaged is through, their community efforts. And I think that is happening, in the circles where folks are working on these issues. So Karen has been at a number of those meetings. I have as well, but certainly there's always more community organizing that could happen. But that would be, I think, the other lever. I'm open to other ideas though.
Which other organizations? I mean, just so that everybody's on board, what are the other organizations?
Yeah, so Together Colorado, I think the whole TOCA coalition has been activated around this, which includes a number of the other Denver Justice Project. You're asking me for a list that's not on the top of my mind, but that sort of ecosystem. So folks who are working in the criminal justice, public safety, reform side of things.
Okay.
And then I would say, some people have been made aware through the district meetings that the police department is having.
Yeah. So is this something that if we did an op-ed, would it be more powerful to have other organizations join in?
Do you mean sign on to the op-ed that we're doing?
Yeah, does it have more, if we show more than ourselves as, or are we such a distinct group that we don't want to have any other sign on to it? This is our voice, period. Or is it a coalition that's formed around it? These are just questions. I don't necessarily have a vested interest in either way that we decide, but I want to throw that question out.
I think there was something about, hold on, I'm pulling up at least the Denver Post. We do not publish organizational statements, business pitches, political campaign promotions as guest commentary. I don't think this is that, but I'm trying to remember what the individuals are rated to one. So maybe we're okay there. That there was something that came into my mind about that.
But to your point, based on the representation that the chief was making, that there was widespread adoption and positive response, it would be helpful if we had other stakeholders sign on to the op-ed, just to show the community, in case they were aware of that response on the part of the chief, that there are people who are pushing back on it. There are organizations that are pushing back on it, besides us.
Yeah, that's what I would like to counter, is that statement about overwhelming support. And this would be a visual as well as a very potent way to have him understand that he can't claim that some people will know who these organizations are, and if they don't know, they'll start to look into them and perhaps start to support their work as well. So I don't know. This is obviously, I don't know how many op-eds prior to this time that we've done, and whether or not.
Not in my time.
Oh, not in your time? So this would be
No.
the first one?
Yeah.
We've done press statements or sort of press releases, or public statements that we sort of can post on the website and may or may not get picked up by the press, but not an official op-ed to my knowledge.
Yeah, so that's another way of doing it. And the Denver Post op-ed, and not that the Post is the only newspaper, but it limits you to a certain number of words. If you're actually going to do an op-ed, then you sort of sit down with the editorial board. So that there's a process there. We could just send a press release and have lots of folks sign on too. Op-ed is not the only way. And this has obviously gotten media coverage in the past.
But the op-ed really has power to it, right?
Mhm.
If a publication picks it up, it has a lot of behind it, and it starts to influence those leadership circles, policy wonks and, you know, government and business maybe in the city, and starts to really elevate the conversation beyond just what sometimes people subscribed as, you know, these leftist, you know, radicals.
Mhm.
So I do like the idea of the op-ed. I think we should continue to pursue it. I
Okay.
do think, though, it would have more oomph if we had others sign on.
Okay.
That's my thinking. Of course, whenever you start expanding beyond your own group, there's a lot of change that comes on those pieces. So I would respect anyone thinking, well, you know, maybe it should just be us, and that way we don't have to deal with anybody else's thoughts about it.
Editorializing, yeah.
No, I mean,
But
Yeah, I think if we're gonna involve a coalition or anything like that, you know, you have to keep it simple, very straightforward and clean. If you want to get multiple sign-ons, you know, keep it very
Well,
focused, you know.
don't
The
you think
ask
we're about
is,
there then now? Aren't we pretty clear and clean about it? No.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's a pretty straightforward issue. So I imagine of the things that we tackle as a board, this is probably pretty
yeah,
more simple than other things.
Well, you know, okay, here's the other strategy is we float it and see if, I mean, they may not want to, you know, for whatever reasons, and that makes
Right.
it easy then. You know, and that would be a little bit interesting to me if people would like, no, you go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I mean, we are distinct, right, in that we are chartered by the city to oversee police conduct. And so there is, you know, on the one hand, I think more in a coalition is always better. And also, you know, this is a particular point that really interacts very clearly with our work. So whereas the outcome, I think, is more of a community outcome, but this is, you know, anyway, I could see it both ways. But maybe floating it and seeing who's interested is the place to start.
And ironically, the I'm going to say outreach committee, but it's the what do we call it? Engagement?
We're going to call it the engagement committee. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the process of revisiting connections with other stakeholders, and this could be something that we address them specifically right now, as
Yeah.
we're kind of like reconnecting with them in way of at least getting an understanding of what their sense and what their feedback would be, and whether or not they would like to join us in the op-ed, and maybe we would have be able to show them the draft that you put together, Julia, which I think really covers all the bases, including the fact that we've got this very haphazard rollout and inclusion of the community informationally about the actual curriculum or whatever they're calling it at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing the suggestion is that as part of the establishment of the engagement committee, that committee is interested in sort of farming this around and seeing if folks would want to sign on and engage in that.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay, part of our coalition building. And just something that popped into my head. We had this spreadsheet years ago. I mean, it's probably 5 years old at this point. Do you have that spreadsheet, which is like all the community orgs?
We had a list that we reviewed at our last, our second engagement committee meeting.
Okay.
And we prioritized from that list. I don't know if that's the spreadsheet that you're talking about, Daniel.
No, I have a much larger spreadsheet that's just a sort of a list of nonprofits in the city of Denver, more or less. And we were, the engagement committee meeting was focused on sort of organizations that we've already had some contact with and
Yeah.
relationships with, and sort of prioritizing that as an initial point of connection as a place to start efforts. But we do have, I mean, we have a very long list of of organizations in Denver, community organizations in Denver, that
Okay.
may or may not, know about us, and may or may not be as involved in public safety. But that's sort of a much more comprehensive list.
Okay, let me see if I can find what I'm talking about, just so you have it, and I'll take that action item, not to take us on a total side vacation to the main vacation, but, okay. And it's, like I said, it's old. It was a contact list of lots of folks working in the space, but it hasn't been updated. We were attempting to update it 5 years ago. And so there may be some new names in there, but maybe those people have also moved on to other things. So anyway, I'll find that and share it around. Okay, anything else on EBD? So what I'll just put a very fine point on is an action item that we've just developed is that the engagement committee will then use this draft letter to connect with other organizations.
Julia, there was, so what we did was we assigned this prioritized list of names to individuals in the engagement committee, but there were a couple that had your name on it.
Oh, okay.
And who was the other person that's not on our committee? Alfredo. So, for example, a meeting that's happening with Servicios de la Raza. We have Larry and Alfredo hopefully attending that along with Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you were assigned to, I forget which one was it? Was it Together Colorado? No,
I think it was
I don't have it.
Julie had more of the connection with the task force.
The
And
task force. Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have her on the Together Colorado as well.
Okay.
I have you on Together Colorado. Actually, Reimagining Task Force. I had myself, and I still can't identify who EO is. Who's EO? That was my note. EO. I don't know. Anyway, so Julia, you're in with the Together Colorado.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, because you've had the longest standing, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um,
Okay, and I just found that spreadsheet, so I'll send it around, like I said, contacts are all.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so given we should set a date for making this happen, just so that it doesn't go,
Well, based on the lack of date from the police chief, I think, just assuming this is imminent at all times is probably, it's like, it's not okay. Okay, it's fine. Where we go. So, I think we should be working in the next 2 weeks on this,
Yes.
to be honest. But I'm open to if other people feel like.
Would July 15th be too far out?
No.
Okay, yeah, so those of us on the engagement committee, be talking to your group and seeing if they can sign on, hopefully to wrap up by July 15th then.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Great. Okay. Moving on to, let's see. A quick note on the annual plan. The annual report. Go ahead, Daniel. I see your hand up.
Thanks. I just had a really quick note I wanted to add. It'll be in the news roundup this afternoon. But earlier this week, as it relates to the flock,
Oh yeah, okay.
that you mentioned earlier, there was a news article on Wednesday, I believe, that came out that showed that Loveland Police Department they have a flock network as well, and they'd given ATF access to their flock network. And there were several searches from a user named A.Bro that searched with the reason being ICE. And it's unclear, according to the news reporting, if that search was limited to Loveland's cameras or if it was using Loveland's account to search everyone's cameras. Loveland does have access to Denver's cameras. And so if it should show up in Denver's audit logs if that search included Denver's cameras or if it was just of Loveland. But that is as you were mentioning, specific examples of it being used, and that one is very close to home and very recent.
Yeah. There's also a student from Western State who was identified using flock cameras and picked up by ICE. She was recently just released because they didn't have any rounds to pick her up. But it's scary for everybody who is involved. Okay. So I think flock continues to be a matter. There is a coalition sort of formed around this. We continue to sort of be in listen mode. There was supposed to be a press conference a couple weeks ago that got prioritized around something else. I think mostly related to city budget issues and discussions around that. And so I think it's useful for us as a board to say, how engaged do we want to be on this topic? And I'll open it up for discussion.
Well, one of the things that I want to just put forward is that there are uses of those cameras that have been very beneficial for public safety purposes as well. And I sometimes get concerned that we throw out the baby with the bathwater because in the instance of for example, auto thefts have really been brought down because of the fact that they've been able to track across different police jurisdictions, these vehicles being stolen or alleged to be stolen. So is there a way that we can keep the public safety piece without having to throw out the entire system? And it's because of the invasion of ICE that we have had to start looking at getting these systems very closely guarded, or I'm not articulating that well, but basically I am concerned that we sometimes give up another aspect that is beneficial because of this recent ICE situation happening. So
yeah, I think ICE is one thing. I think it's really generally the right to privacy is something bigger. I mentioned an example of somebody seeking an abortion and then, having some, I think it was a case of Texas,
it's always Texas.
So I don't think it's just if we're saying this is related to the current moment, the current practices, right, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is the city signing up to a general surveillance network where all forms of law enforcement have access to data people never agreed to share.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in addition to that, even if to limit the use of flock, there's an issue with regard to trust at this point that law enforcement and other interested agencies adhere to the restrictive use that we all agree to, if assuming that we agree to the use of flock. And interestingly enough, we've got a lawsuit involving the mayor right now, where he has given information of a private party to a law enforcement agency.
Do you mean the governor?
Oh, I'm sorry, the governor.
The governor?
Governor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking just technologically not all that gifted. This invasion of privacy, I see, Tamisha, you brought that up. At this point, do we even have any right to privacy left, given the amount of data that is out there, not just from these cameras? I'm talking exclusive of the cameras. Every time I'm on this dang device, boop, phone, there's all sorts of data that I'm releasing, known or unbeknown to me. So okay. I'm not at all disagreeing about the fact that information is being released to other entities. That really does concern me. And I'm just wondering if there's just any way to tighten that so that there isn't inappropriate access by others and still retain some of the beneficial effort with this. If there's not, then we have to give it up completely because of the fact that they are not utilizing it for its intended purpose. But now other people are accessing it and using it for sometimes very, very inappropriate or even illegal reasons. So,
I think there's three things. So the first thing is that the city didn't renew the contract. And so that's set to expire in the fall or the end of the year. I can't remember.
end of the year, I think.
Yeah. And so that's the first thing is like, we don't have to, I think, agree or disagree with its use as a technology because the city has already said we won't use this in the future. I think the second thing is what we were told it was going to be used for is now different. Right. It was supposed to be used to reduce auto theft, which it, presumably has based on the data that's been shared.
It has, yeah.
But it's now being used for other kinds of law enforcement, which was not the described use. So that there's a difference there. And there are a number of months where the city will continue to use it. And so what happens with those months, I think, is a question. And then there's this third thing in my mind, which is like, I don't have any confidence that the police department has thoughtfully evaluated its data sharing, data retention, and like cybersecurity protocols such that all of the technologies they're using have been thought through in terms of who has access to the data and when. And so it feels like all of a sudden we've got 7 different kinds of, cameras in the city. And is there some sort of like surveillance data, tool that they're using that pulls all that together? Or is it like pretty random who gets access? Because other cities didn't deploy with broad access, right? But Denver did. And so was that a deliberate choice or an accidental choice? Like all of this to me is like you're right, Rufina, like people are always trying to get data. Data is the only currency for the future, but like who's being thoughtful about that from a public safety standpoint? And Flock is a good indicator that maybe nobody in my mind. So that I think it's sort of 3 things is like, this is different than what you said it was for. We still have it for a few more months. And so what are you doing to protect the information of residents of the city? And then the third thing is like, who is actually thinking about privacy and data sharing holistically at the department?
Okay.
Karen, Larry, Tamisha, I think what you said in the chat was because people are sort of coming for our privacy, we should not just give it away. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, I think that we've gotten into a pattern where we are blanketly just giving up our privacy access without understanding the ramifications of that. And secondly, based on what you're saying, I believe that it's evident that the police department is not performing the adequate measures. So there should have been a SWOT performed, a risk analysis to determine what risk was actually presented or going to be presented with the use of the technology. So the questions weren't properly asked, nor did they have a plan to mitigate those risks. And so if they're doing it for this, the real question is, like you said, is what other tools have that access as well? And it's more than just an ISIS issue. I know that, that's like high on our list, but we also have another issue where you don't know if that other police department is actually looking to see a woman who's traveling across lines from a place where abortions are illegal to coming into Colorado where they are legal, right? And so now you have a woman who ideally really isn't committing a crime, can be charged with a crime that they wouldn't have had access to or knowledge about had the system not been open with the permissions that they had. So it's more than just an ICE issue, which is the predominant issue, but there's more than that. There's other risks that come along with this system. So
How long have we had the flock cameras in effect?
Daniel, do you remember 2 years?
I
seamlessly?
think it's about a year. I
A
think
year,
it was,
okay.
last summer,
Mm.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
maybe a little before summer, late spring, early summer.
that sounds right to me.
And so prior to January 2025, had there been any issues regarding their releasing information to other jurisdictions or other entities?
I believe it hadn't come up as an issue. It also wasn't public knowledge. The police department had shared a dashboard saying these are the entities that we're sharing it with, and they were all local Colorado police departments. It then became public knowledge later that they were also sharing it nationwide, or part of a national data sharing program or portion of Flock that was not disclosed publicly. And prior to January 2025, I think the fears about potential abuses or bad faith uses by federal partners or even other Colorado state agencies wasn't quite at the same level.
Okay. Yeah, right. That's an understatement.
Larry, I see you're off mute. Were you gonna provide some thoughts?
No, I was just gonna say in terms of insurances, that it's not gonna be used in a different way. I mean, my concern is they'll tell us that, but we have no way to really control that in the future. They've told us that in the past, that it wasn't gonna be misused, and then it's used different ways. So I think the use if they're there, they're gonna use them regardless of what they tell us.
True enough.
So the original question that I asked was, does the board feel that this is something we should be engaged on? And recognizing, it's probably only a few more months, at least in this current form, probably won't be a long issue for us. It'll come up in a new way for sure. But, if there's this coalition, do we want to be a part of it? Those kinds of things.
Who's in the coalition at this?
Well,
time?
some of the council members, Councilmember Parity is sort of leading a coalition. Rufina, you keep asking me for these lists.
I'm sorry.
No, it's the right question. It's the right question. Okay, who else was on?
I can pull it together and email it out if that's easier.
Together Colorado, some researchers, individuals, members of the city, Colorado Immigrant.org, ACLU, Task Force on Reimagining Policing. So who you might imagine would be in a group focused on privacy.
I think the
Well, that's a
ACLU has taken a strong stand on it.
It's a good group to be with. I think for me, the answer is yes. I think we should still stay on it because of the fact that there will be another version of this at
Always.
very soon, I'm sure. And so what we take from this is some of the questions and some of the pressure points that we need to address before it goes forward, right? So yeah, I think so.
Okay, Karen, Tymisha, Larry, any?
I agree. I think we should stay engaged and involved.
Agreed.
I agree. I think it's the catalyst to push for the police department to actually review all of their software. And perform a risk assessment. So being a cybersecurity person, I
Right.
have stronger concerns, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm having a
There
lot
to
of
be-
feelings.
Tamisha is the expert, so I will defer to you, Tamisha.
So, but yeah, from a technical perspective, they really do need to evaluate that, perform a risk assessment, and then figure out how they're gonna mitigate those risks, and present that to the public. So I think this is probably the catalyst we can use to drive that action.
Okay, great. So some cohesion there. Let's see. The next sort of big topic in the category of concerns or matters in front of the board would be RTD officer oversight. So EDOS Saldate a couple weeks ago presented the board with the concept that the RTD officers are looking to get authority that only the executive director of safety can designate, which basically makes them a police force and gives them all the rights and authorities thereof, including increased access to use of force as a matter of protocol. And this is sort of an evergreen issue in the city. It's come up for as long probably as the RTD police have been around. They're currently post-certified, but they act as a private security or a security. No, Daniel, you're shaking your head.
They are police officers.
Okay.
They just don't have jurisdiction in Denver to enforce Denver's ordinance.
Right. Okay, thanks. Yes.
And so it's a question of, like, they have guns, they have badges, they're already certified as police officers, but it's police officers from a different jurisdiction wanting to also be able to enforce the law in Denver.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, good. And so that authority can only be delegated through the EDOS of safety. He has expressed concern, and we appreciate his concern, that there is no oversight over the RTD police currently. So some discussions are happening with the monitor's office and with his office to sort of figure out how this might happen. So just sort of highlighting that there are some probably data that we would like to have access to, including like how much use of force actually happens in a year, what are their disciplinary procedures, how many shootings are there, what's your discipline handbook and approach look like, etc. And so I think more information needs to come. Liz, do you want to say anything about sort of where the conversation is at present?
Yeah, I had a brief discussion with Steve Martingano. I believe he is the chief of the RTD force. And just generally, I think he was following up with me in terms of their desire to want to add oversight to in order to get more get the ability to handle cases directly. Right now, they if they need backup assistance or if someone needs to be arrested, they need to call a contract DPD officer who is contracted with them to give support, and that's not 24/7. And I believe they're looking to expand the force and also expand the scope of if they get the authority to basically file cases, open cases, which I think it's not just a matter of citations, but county court cases, but also potentially as much as felonies. So we are in the process of trying to get more specific information as to first of all, what their authority is, how they're run, and it's my understanding they are under a board, and similar to the questions that you've been asking, Julia.
Rufina, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so I have a real issue with expanding their authority. given the fact that we make it a point to really stress the training for our officers under DPD and continued, accountability. I don't know that they would be under the same kind of training regimen that we are. I'm sorry, not that we are, that the DPD is, and that we keep wanting to, increase. And so their ability to now enter into this arena without the same requirements, without the same kind of training criteria, I'm just not convinced that this is a good move. Yeah, they have to call DPD. So does every other citizen. I don't know. I'm not hearing a persuasive argument for wanting to increase their authority without them increasing to match DPD's requirements that we have for DPD officers currently.
Go ahead, Karen.
And Liz has discussion of any kind of a MOU that they would sign, that first of all would be put together and designed and signed off on, that they would adhere to, understanding that we had the nightmarish experience of outlying county officers coming in for the George Floyd protest and wreaking havoc with the way they did their crowd control.
I really don't know enough about it, or yeah, I think a lot of it is, how they get their authority, what they're authorized to do, what are the limitations and restrictions, right? Are they going to assign RTD officers just to Denver? Some officers just to Denver. Obviously, we have no jurisdiction outside of the city and county of Denver. The whole framework is new to me, and I just don't know enough about it. So we're just starting the conversation. They came to me about oversight, and I'm like, well, I don't know. First, I got to know, the structure of your agency, how you function, what we're talking about, what kinds of cases that you're seeking to have authority over. But it sounds to me like what they want is the authority to file misdemeanor and eventually felony cases and increase their numbers as well. But I don't know if that means in RTD as to RTD in general, or just as to the ones that will be assigned to Denver.
Yeah.
They are, my understanding is they are post-certified.
Yes, that's my understanding as well. Okay.
So does that mean that they follow the same training criteria that DPD has?
No.
Right. That it's separate and apart, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that would be a major feature for me, is that they had to have the same training, and that obviously increases training budget for RTD. Are they willing to go there? So, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a reason to say yes to this at all at this point. But, it's just me.
Because the other question I would have is, in light of you being understaffed, do you have capacity?
Yeah. We
Or
barely can keep up with the stuff we've got now.
Yeah, the what has been proposed is that if they are asking us to conduct oversight, that they would pay for the staffing at the OIM to do that oversight. But I have no concept of what that looks like, how many cases they have, what the parameters are, and if what's going to happen when they change those parameters. Right now, they're just issuing citations, but once they start arresting people and having those interactions, potentially confrontational interactions, that's a whole nother world.
Yeah, not to mention OIM's authority is within the city and county of Denver, but RTD's service area is much broader. So there are some questions as to if you do something in Lakewood that requires oversight, is that the OIM doing that? Or, is it just for the bad behavior in Denver? So, and what about right on the border? What happens? Okay. So more to come on that. I think a lot of open questions, but just sort of making sure we're aware that it's going on. Moving into just one quick decision. So a few weeks ago, I think I mentioned this on a meeting, but in our annual report, we failed to mention that the fire chief, Desmond Fulton, had received significant disciplinary actions as a result of some sort of misuse of time off. And we forgot to mention it in our annual report. We were so focused on other things. And so we wanted to just get approval from the board to amend our annual report and sort of include that as like what happened in public safety this year in our summary. And then the question was, the short story was there were some findings that resulted in accountability of the chief for his behavior. He was to pay back the time he had, Daniel, I see your hand raised before I say the wrong thing. So great, you go.
Yeah, there was an investigation that was conducted into the conduct of the fire chief. That investigation is public. It's a public document. There were no formal disciplinary actions taken, although the mayor did ask Fire Chief Fulton to repay some portion of the funds in question, which the fire chief agreed to do. And so whether you want to count that as a disciplinary action, an informal disciplinary action or not, that did occur, but no formal disciplinary actions were taken. And so, yeah, our report was very focused while we were writing it on the police and sheriff's side, and I completely neglected to include that very significant event. And then I think the question, I guess two questions was, one was, are we good with the language of the draft amendment? And then the second one was, where do we want to place it in the report? We could place it in the sort of year in review as just this happened, or we could place it in the board concerns section as something that the board is concerned about and monitoring.
I think year in review is certainly appropriate since we didn't take any action on that, did we?
No.
Yeah. So I don't think we can claim any sort of action was taken because of our efforts. So year in review sounds very appropriate. The other one regarding concerns, I mean, it's not systematic. This is an individual. And I forget, is he now off? Didn't he? No, he's still there?
No, the union voted no confidence, but he's still in his position. He's appointed by the mayor.
So now if we take action and hopefully he's removed, I think then we could claim it as part of our, because we really didn't have any conversations about concerns, did we?
No.
I think it's appropriate in year in review as opposed to concerns.
Karen, Larry, Tamisha?
I agree. And I think the other portion was that there were some other officers or some other members of the department that followed his lead in claiming unjustly overtime pay.
Right.
Right?
Correct. It's been a long-standing practice among fire department leadership. So it's not a practice that the fire chief came up with or invented. It's something that he sort of inherited and continued uncritically, and was, discovered under his watch, I suppose, or flagged under his watch. And so I think that's part of the complicating factor there of, how at fault is he for doing something that everyone else did before him and that he was taught to do, but he's still the chief and should have known better and should have been responsible for, ensuring
Changing a
compliance with the
practice.
ordinance for his whole team, not just himself. And so the investigative report does characterize it as sort of an organizational failing. But it also and it makes recommendations for organizational changes, procedural changes to make sure that it won't happen again. However, it also says, the buck stops with the top executive, and he did have a responsibility to ensure that ordinance was followed with both for himself and his team. And so there's a follow-on question as to whether or not the board does want to sort of recommend some form of discipline in that case to the mayor and the executive director of safety. If the board feels like a formal disciplinary action is warranted and is something that the board wants to get involved in.
Liz, did your office have a recommendation for discipline?
This case did not come through the OIM.
Because he doesn't have a badge and a gun. So the OIM is focused on badges and guns. The fire, which only includes about, I think fewer than a
Arson
dozen.
investigators.
Fewer than a dozen arson investigators in the fire department. And so the fire chief himself does not have a badge or a gun. They are sworn, but they're not under the OIM's jurisdiction in that way. They do fall under the COB's jurisdiction.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
so yeah, I would say we can take action now. In terms of this annual report, I think it's still under year in review. And then when we do this letter or
Well,
state,
so, yeah. So before we say that, so this all happened, like in January, maybe even earlier. So I just want to point out that this is like, the matter is mostly
2026?
dead. And so if we take action, we're sort of like, bringing this
After
zombie
the
back to
fact.
life.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, so
It
no
was-
action is really required of us.
Not necessarily, I mean, the board could say like the fire chief should really be, making things better and understanding, conflicts and ethics and all those things and identifying ways to improve it. I just want to highlight, like, no one else is caring about this issue now. And so if the board wants to pick this up, we're probably going to be doing that by ourselves, a little bit out of sync with the matter.
Yeah, I get it. Our timing wouldn't be the best to do something now. But the first question was whether we should include it in the annual report and in where. And so my response is year in review.
And did it occur in 2023?
The offenses occurred on an ongoing basis for over a decade. The matter was brought to light first in April of 2024 in the media. And then the investigative report they hired an outside investigator to perform the investigation. That investigative report was published in October of 2024. So approximately 8 months ago. And then in February of 2025, the union, firefighters union, held a vote of no confidence in the fire chief, due in part to not just the offenses, but also the lack of discipline that they from the mayor or executive director of safety for an offense that they believed if any of them did, they would have been significantly disciplined for.
And there was no action from like career service or like the city's legal department. I mean, that's
The chief is not subject to the Civil Service Commission. He's a mayoral appointee. He's not part of that personnel system. So the command staff is under a separate personnel system from firefighters.
That's part of the contention, right? Is like, if he was an employee of the department, the action would have been different. So.
And so, yeah, we could recommend discipline under, and we could go through sort of the typical framework that a firefighter might go through, and we could recommend that the same standards be applied, but there's no requirement that the same standards be applied. Or that the fire department has a disciplinary matrix, but it applies to people under the Civil Service Commission framework system.
Okay. So it's not without complexity. It's not necessarily like an outcome we would have advocated for in any context, but we sort of missed it, I would say, is the best way to describe it.
Enough for us to just mention it in the year-end review and go forward?
I think so. If you want to do anything, that's where I would put our effort. But I think since we've missed the whole thing, might as well just leave it as is, you know?
Okay, Tanisha agrees. Larry, any disagreement on this? Okay. All right, so we'll do that. Year in review, mention it, bad behavior, we don't agree with it. We think discipline matters. And we were focused on other things at the time.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, community status updates. So I have heard from board members, we want to discuss the Johanna Holy Elk Face matter. I am literally drawing a blank on where we've left that. So Daniel, if you can be the second part of my brain for this conversation, that's helpful.
There was a letter that we were drafting, responding to her.
We have not sent a formal letter. I've sent some emails, since our, let's see, I have not heard back from them, or at least not from her attorney, in, I think, gosh, at least 6 weeks. And so I just sent another email, earlier this week. But I've left a voicemail and attempted to call a couple times to get in touch and sort of get the latest status update there. But not a whole lot to update on that front.
But did we need information from them in order to be able to respond to them?
No, I had shared some information with them, and was hoping to see if that had been productive information or useful information for them, to see if there's any further steps to take on our end. Apologies. Or whether it's send them a letter and say we've done what we can. I think that's where I left it, as providing them some information, and then trying to get a status update for you all that has been so far unsuccessful.
Yeah, I'm troubled by the fact that we haven't responded yet, because that was something they were seeking from us. And I thought in our response, we could, not in explicit terms, but in some fashion, guide them towards the place that they could perhaps get the information. Am I recalling that incorrectly?
Yeah, and like I said, I have sent them emails and left them a voicemail and tried to communicate some of the board's advice. But I have not yet heard back from them as to whether or not that was helpful, or whether that's something that they where things stand currently.
So we have followed up, but it wasn't
Yes.
some
It
big
wasn't a
formal
formal
letter from the
board
board.
letter.
I think to sort of close this, I would like to see that letter be issued.
Okay.
It just leaves this, unsettled situation, and I don't know, maybe that's one of my little quirks, is that I don't like.
Yeah, I
things
think
to
there's
just be-
I think there's some, like, you are actually a lawyer, so that's great, but the rest of us are not lawyers, and so sort of providing, I think, legal advice,
Right.
that's why we've sort of tried informally to provide information.
But if indeed we have done all we can and looking into her situation, I mean, one of her complaints was that she never got responses from these other entities. And I thought, well, we shouldn't be in that category. So I don't want to continue to have this just be unspoken. In other words, we have
Right.
responded.
Yeah, so we have multiple times responded.
Right, but just officially, so that there is no further leaving this unsaid. We should just say what we were going to say in that letter. We've tried looking into it, whatever we were saying. I mean, it's been 3 months, I think now. Hasn't it been 3 months?
Many, yeah.
You'd have to specify what was 3 months ago. Her
Her
original
meeting with
meeting
us.
board-
at
Her
the
original
time.
meeting with
Yeah.
us was
Last year.
last year, last October, I believe.
And then we had an instance this year where she came to the meeting.
She's come to us, I think, 3
A
times.
couple times. Mhm.
Yeah. The last time being March or
I
April.
believe so. That sounds about right. March.
Yeah.
I've met with her as well and her attorney.
Nisha,
Yeah.
next.
So let's go ahead. And we had a draft, I thought. Daniel, am I not remembering that correctly, that we had a draft of some sort?
There may have been. I need to go double check whether it was a draft of a formal letter or just notes about what kinds of things we could say. But I could certainly put, regardless of whether there was a draft, I can certainly put a draft together relatively quickly.
Well,
You muted, Julia.
Okay, yeah, so when you get a chance, Daniel, let's circulate something around and we'll move on from that.
okay.
Okay, I think that's all we should cover here in the public meeting for the board, just to make sure we've got time for the monitor. Monitor Castle, might you have anything to cover in the public meeting?
Nothing further.
Okay, do you have matters that you'd like to cover in executive session?
Yes, please.
Okay, might I have a motion to adjourn the board into executive session for the purposes of discussing confidential information about internal investigations or other material subject to deliberative privilege?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Uh,
Any opposed? Okay, we'll see you over there. Oh, Daniel, go ahead.
Oh, crap, we already lost one. Never mind. We'll just postpone the minute approval to the next meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you. Can we do it in executive session?
No.
All right, thanks.
Daniel, Greg is gonna be entering into the meeting as well.
Thank
Bye.